Olá, boa tarde a todos. Muito obrigada pela presença. O Piano e Suas Perspectivas é um programa da Escola de Música e Artes Cênicas, Reitoria Digital e Pró-Reitoria de Extensão e Cultura da Universidade Federal de Goiás, Mississippi State University e Universidad del Atlántico, na Colômbia, com apoio da Fundação para Ciência e Tecnologia de Portugal, Centro de Estudos de Sociologia e Estética Musical da Universidade Nova de Lisboa, Centro de Estudos Brasileiros, Rádio Universitária e Rádio Brasil Central FM. A entrevistadora de hoje será a doutora Rosângela Seba, que também faz parte da equipe do programa, além da doutora Yamira Rodrigues Nunes e Pablo Lisboa. A doutora Rosângela é chefe do departamento de piano da Escola de Música da Mississippi State University. The Piano and its Perspectives is a program of the School of Music and Performing Arts, Digital Department and the Provost of Culture of the Federal University of Goiás, Universidad del Atlántico, Colombia, and Mississippi State University, with support from the Foundation for Science and Technology of Portugal, Center for Studies in Sociology and Music Aesthetics of the New University of Lisbon, Center for Brazilian Studies, Radio Universitária, and Radio Brasil Central FM. Besides me, Pablo Lisboa, Rosângela Yazbek Seba, and Yamira Rodrigues Nunes are part of the program's team. Our proposal is to bring to all those interested issues related to the importance of music and its role in the society. The interviewer today will be Dr. Rosângela Seba, head of the piano department, Mississippi State University. Thank you very much, Dr. Rose and Dr. Baker. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Piano and its Perspective here in the United States. I have the pleasure to interview my colleague, Jason Baker. Dr. Baker is a professor of percussion studies at Mississippi State University. He is an arranger, coordinator of the MSU drumline, and recruiting coordinator for our department. He has a very large task in coordinating all our recruiting efforts. He holds degrees from University of North Texas, New England Conservatory of Music, and University of Connecticut. He's also a writer. He has written several articles, and he has 4 solo albums, as well as 3 etude books for percussion instruments, and as well as over 30 arrangements and compositions, many released by different publishers. So please welcome Dr. Baker. Dr. Baker, thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're going to talk about your life as a percussionist, as a teacher, and as a musician, a performer as well. But before that, there are several things that people don't understand or know about you. One of them is, how did you start getting involved in learning music in general, especially percussion?
Sure. Well, I grew up around a lot of music as a young person. Probably my earliest memory of music or being involved in music was my father had all of the Beatles records on vinyl. So I remember at a young age, probably when I was 5 or 6 or 7, spending a lot of time at the record player, listening to all of those albums. And, you know, if you've listened to the Beatles, you would know just over the course of the 10 years that they were together, or the 10 years they were releasing albums, it's incredibly diverse, the styles of music and popular music that in which they work. So that was kind of my first introduction. The church that my mother went to and I would accompany her to was certainly had a very involved music program, lots of activities for the children there. If it was holiday performances, different vocal groups, children's choir. So even before I began deciding that I wanted to learn an instrument or learn how to play music formally, it was something that was very much around me. And like a lot of people my age and from where I'm from, I started playing music in the school band program. I grew up in Connecticut, and we started in the 5th grade. And then that eventually led into the school band in junior high school. I started off playing snare drum. Then when I got to junior high school, I took an interest in drum set and began playing in the jazz band there. And that opened me up to opportunities with a lot of my peers playing drum set in different informal bands and groups of that nature. And then getting to high school, playing in the marching band, that really became the center of the social experience for my friends and myself. And that was something for me that was very important. I wasn't very athletic. I spoke with a really severe stutter as a child. I still have a bit of one right now, but it was very difficult for me, especially as a younger person. And I think anybody who's been involved in music or the arts would attest to, in band or in music, anything like that, you don't need to be the most athletic. You don't need to be the most popular or charismatic. If you take the music seriously and you practice it and you're loyal and you come to rehearsal, you're welcomed in as part of the team, as part of the group. And I think something that even to this day, how it works into my life, into my personality, is that music is something you can do by yourself, for hours and hours, just spending time alone doing it. But then it's also something that you can interact on the opposite end of the spectrum with large groups of people. So I think it factored into my life, one, that it was enjoyable to do, but it was really where I kind of found my people, so to speak. So yeah, and that led to wanting to pursue it at the college level. And then wanting to do that, I had to learn a lot of other instruments that I didn't know, such as the marimba and the timpani. And that certainly paved the way for a lot of the work I've done since then.
Explain a little bit to the audience, because here in South America, as well as in Europe, music is not taught primarily in the public schools or schools. We have conservatories. And so we have the right to decide which teacher you want to study, as well as where to go for the conservatory and which instrument we select. I know that in the United States is different. You usually have the first approach music in school, and you have a teacher that is kind of like a landmark for you, that makes that decision for you as well and helps you make the decision. Did you have any secondary instrument, or can you explain a little bit more why you ended up starting with the snare drum?
I don't know. I think just like a lot of boys my age, not to say it's only boys, but at least where I was, it seemed like all of the energetic young people wanted to play drums. And I don't know. I think my first experience with percussion, there was always a parade during Memorial Day. And even as a young person, as a very young person, I remember the drums playing. I remember going to football games with my parents, and the band would be there. And there was something very visceral about the drums. And I wasn't thinking about wanting to do it professionally or doing it in college or anything. It was just a very sort of innocent, childlike thing of, that felt good. That sounds cool. And I think my experiences might be a little bit different than some. I know my wife is one of the beginning band directors here in town in Starkville, and they're responsible for selecting which instruments the students are going to play. And they actually have a night where the students come in and they try out different instruments, and they let the students maybe list a few different choices, maybe a first, second, and third choice. And then depending upon how many instruments they have or how it's going to fit into the music program there, they try to find the instrument that's the right fit for the student based upon what they demonstrated, and also as far as, you know, what the needs of the program are. You can't have all drums or all saxophone or something like that. So there has to be a balance. My memory, though, because we didn't have a band when I was in 5th grade. We didn't start band until the 7th grade. So the first 2 years, there would be an instrument teacher that would come to our school. And it wasn't like he was the specific percussion person or specific flute or saxophone. He sort of taught all of them. And he would have a class once per week. And so we would all go down to a certain room and do that. I don't think there was any criteria for getting to play a certain thing. I just think you circled the box that said, I want to play this. And I don't know. I think each town and each, you know, in the United States, there are so many different parts of the country that do things differently, and based upon their funding or based upon the culture, how they do it and why they do it could differ wildly. So that was the experience I was in. And then from there, one of the things I'm very thankful for my parents for was that they supported me getting private lessons in addition to the experience I was having in school, because we didn't have a specific percussion teacher at that school. And I know a lot of schools now, they have at least, or they try to have a number of band teachers, and each one has a specialization. Maybe there's one that's a woodwinds teacher, one that's an upper brass, one that's lower brass, one that's percussion. But we didn't have that necessarily where I was growing up. So I was, my parents let me take private lessons, and that was something that, you know, to have that apprentice and mentor kind of approach that you know, comes from perhaps the conservatory background of going into a one-on-one environment, and there's, you know, there's a lesson each week, and there's an expectation, and you're personally accountable each week, and the teacher really takes you at your own level of, okay, you're good at this, but not so good at this. We're going to work on this, but not this. And that's something that now later in life, that's one of the things that I really enjoy teaching at the university level, that even though there are large courses and large ensembles, we're still, we still involve that a apprentice and teacher, or the apprentice and mentor sort of model that I think has been a part of music for centuries and centuries.
Well, I'm glad you talked about that. And one of the reasons that sometimes people go into music is the fun of making music with each other, and the dream of being a performer and live off being a performer. But there's a part that not everybody enjoys or has taken, which is being a teacher, being a mentor. And so how did you get to that point where you decided, okay, I'm going to be a musician and I would like to be a teacher, something that you already started talking about? Is there any time in your life that you decided to do that?
Well, I think that I was always in tune with, or I found myself curious when I was being taught why the teacher would say that, or how they would, or the way that they're doing something. I don't think I was naturally talented in music. I think I had a natural curiosity, but I don't think I was born any better qualified for a life in music than I would have a number of other things. So I had to always, I felt that if I was going to improve, I really had to listen carefully to what the teacher was saying, and then apply it in the best way possible that I knew, and then go back the next week and hear how maybe certain things didn't go well, so I needed to do it differently for next time. So I always had an interest in the process, and being involved in marching band and drum and bugle corps. those being large groups and the drumline and percussion being a larger group, the teachers there were almost like how a coach would be for a team or something like that. So just like how people would study a really successful football coach or basketball coach and the way they managed the team and the way they motivated people, I was always curious, even from when I was a performing member of those groups, while the rehearsal was going on, I tried to almost anticipate what the instructor was going to say and why they would say it, and the types of exercises we would play to develop our ability, and the way they would structure the rehearsal, and different things like that. So that, I think that led me to having some pretty definitive opinions early on about how things should be taught in the process of that. That's not to say that they were the best opinions, but I think I had a really defined idea of how to go about things. And of course, then the next part is getting an opportunity to actually try those things out and see what works. And oftentimes when you're young, what does not work. And I think I started teaching when I was living in Boston as a student at the New England Conservatory. And I remember not a lot of the students there having the same interest in teaching, at least at that time, as me. I mean, they were very focused on taking auditions, playing concertos, things of that nature. And I was doing that as well, but I was able, just through my interest in teaching and sort of this part of my brain that always wanted to think about that as well, I was able to seek out some opportunities there. I taught a little bit at Boston College, one of the high schools in the Boston area. I was friends with the band director there, so he asked me to come out and work with some students. I got asked to teach a couple of summers with a drum and bugle corps when they were on tour. So over the years there, not only was I absorbing the things I was learning myself in being taught at the conservatory, but I think that having those opportunities to teach, that gave me a little bit of confidence when it came to applying for a graduate assistantship at the University of North Texas and getting to be a teaching fellow there, and also getting to be an active teacher in the Dallas area as I was supporting myself while I was in school.
Yeah. One of the things that always caught my attention, because I remember when you were hired, I think we've been working together, 17 years? Is that correct? How long?
This is my 19th year.
19th, okay.
Yeah, I know. All of 2004, yeah.
Yeah, no, time goes by fast. But I remember one of the things that caught my attention about you was that you always put yourself on a situation where you are uncomfortable or not comfortable because you want to learn. And I remember we played together the Bartók, two pianos in percussion sonata, which was very uncomfortable, I think, for
all people.
For all. It is not an easy work. It's and we had 4 rehearsals, I guess, and not much time to practice. And but anyway, I admire that, and I see that every time that we talk, you have a plan and you say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I know that your music, your arrangements have been performed abroad, and one of them in Taiwan, Kaohsiung. I know also that you are constantly going to conferences and taking your students with you, and they are performing. So what is your philosophy as a musician? Or I think I know the answer, but I would like for you to express yourself, because not always musicians believe in themselves and they wait until they are ready to do certain things. And as we get older, we understand that we are never ready, and we can never wait for the opportunity. You have to carve that opportunity as well as put yourself out there in
Yeah.
very uncomfortable situations. So talk a little bit about that, please.
Sure. Oh, I think I I feel very lucky to work in the situation where I work, where a lot of times I just get to dream something up and then I go for it.
Yeah.
And working in academia, it can mean so many different things, especially when you're younger and going through the promotion process. There are so many different angles you can try, and they all count. They're all going to help your career out. And just to be in an environment where I can dream something up, and as long as it doesn't cost too much money, nobody's going to tell me that I can't do it, or at least that I can't try to do it. And I don't know. I've just always enjoyed that. Geez, I hope I have a good enough answer for you.
No, yeah, you do. And again, let me ask you this: why did you want to do the bar talk? I know I always wanted to do the bar talk, but not everybody wants to do the bar talk. And you invited me to participate in that project. And at first I thought, I don't know if I can do it.
Yeah.
And
Well,
again,
it's one of those pieces. I feel like there are certain benchmark pieces in percussion that in order to be credible in my teaching, I have to have gone after them. Like a number of years back, I realized I've never conducted ionization by Edgar Ferez. So I set about, just an idea of, okay, if we were to do that piece here, how would we do it? And I think maybe that gets back more to your initial question of, if you don't feel ready for something, I think you have to ask the question, okay, if I was ready, how would I be ready? And then it just means you just have to plan more. Maybe there's some steps you take. Our percussion studio at the time, I couldn't pass the parts to ionization out the week before the concert and then we could just do it. I'd have to say, okay, what players do I have right now? How much time is that going to take? We don't have the right instruments for it. Okay, can we substitute something? How can I raise some money to get those? And you just look at, okay, it's possible. Maybe it's not possible this week or this month or in 6 months, but what are the steps I need to take if that were to be possible? And I think with my performance career as well too, going back to your question about the bar talk, that was always a question of, okay, if this is going to be possible, I have to know the right people at the right time. And that initially came from when Tim Feeney was teaching at University of Alabama. And Tim is a monster chamber music player, new music person, plays really difficult and challenging pieces of music. So he had asked me to play in the Tuscaloosa Symphony with him. And I remember during a rehearsal, getting a chance to watch him perform and saying to myself, man, this guy's really, really great. How can I get an opportunity to play with him? If I'm here and he's here, how can I get a little closer? Like if you want to get better at basketball, play basketball with better people. If you want to learn how to do anything, if there's a way, as uncomfortable as that might be, to put yourself in a situation where you're not the best person, I think that's the best way to learn. And that's something as a younger person, I always shied away from, because I was very self-conscious and I don't want to be exposed as not being that good. Or and I think back on, if I could go back and do some of the opportunities over again in school, I would go after the biggest thing. And even if I failed, I would try every single thing. And I think back on maybe some of the opportunities that I wasn't able to grow as much from. It was because I wanted to stay in that safe sort of place. But yeah, so I remember watching Tim play, and again, in my mind, okay, there's a list of pieces that I need to do. Okay, I know Tim knows somebody. He's got to know somebody that can play one of the piano parts. And I think I was like, I remember saying, okay, I bet there's somebody on our piano faculty I can find. And I sent an email, I think it was to Jackie, Karen Murphy, and to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember asking Tim, like, hey, if I can find somebody to do the bar talk, would you want to? And I think in the percussion world, it's almost like a challenge where if somebody asks you if you want to do it, you're obviously going to say yes. So I think he was like, oh, sure, great. So I remember asking you, and I think out of that email, you were the one who stepped up and said, yeah, sure, I will do it. And so, and then it goes back to that question of, okay, we don't get to rehearse every single day or every single week. We're separated by these two different campuses. We're going to have to take a step back and look at how this is going to happen. It can happen, but it's going to be unconventional. And so that you wrote that really wonderful SEC grant that allowed for our funding for them to travel here and us to travel there. Then we get into the specifics of what we're going to work on at a certain point. We only have so much time, so we have to be very careful about that. And I think anytime you're in an unconventional situation, if it's playing or even if it's teaching, if you're teaching in a department that is small or doesn't maybe have the funding you would want or the facilities or the students or something, I find that I'm being just as creative in the planning as I would be in the playing. I feel like the same part of my brain, the same circuits are going on up here when I'm planning, okay, how would that be possible? If I was going to take my percussion ensemble to a conference and perform, maybe we're a little bit different than the Eastman School is, but it is possible, maybe what we play and how we practice and how I plan it and maybe how we approach that. The outcome, we're looking for a similar outcome, but we're as musicians, we're used to being resourceful and being creative, if it's and how we perform or how we compose or something or how we interpret something. We have those parts of our brain that we use probably more so than most people, looking at the process as a creative activity. For me, I think is what has helped me at least along my career of not being discouraged or looking at potential roadblocks as opportunities. Of course, I'm only human, I can get discouraged as much as the next person. But the thing that I try to use to pick myself up and keep going is not so much in the outcome, but looking at the process and the planning as being unique to every situation and every environment. So
Yeah, that's great. I think one of my dreams was to perform that work, and I couldn't I couldn't get the group together. But I was glad that you had already planned and invited, and I jumped right in.
Good. And also that's fun too. I think when you can be in an opportunity with other people
Yep.
and they're all forced to do the same thing, that's where I am in my life right now. I think when you're young, you look for opportunity. When you're a little older, you take advantage of opportunity. And then when you're a little older than that, you create opportunity. And not just for your students, but for other like-minded people that are your same age too. So music and creativity in work is this thing that can sustain you all throughout your life.
Yeah, I like what you said, because it is applicable to everybody, any instrument.
Sure.
But one thing that always catches my attention is when you are performing. I see you performing a lot marimba, and one of the things that I notice in your performance is you are very sensitive to the tone that you produce, not only in marimba but in other instruments as well, and also how sometimes you can do certain effects in your playing. It's not just playing. I think that's what catches my attention every time you perform. And you have such a variety of instruments, just looking in your background right now.
Lord, yeah.
I know. It's like you have to make yourself, split yourself in so many different directions. So you are a diverse percussionist. But what is the instrument that you like the most and you enjoyed the most in your performances, and even composing for?
Sure. Well, there's a couple of different answers there. I think that the instrument that I enjoy playing the most is probably the marimba. I don't think that's my best one, though. I think, I play the instrument well enough to play it in public. I play it well enough to make recordings on. I don't think there's anything I'm doing that is necessarily, I don't think it's the instrument that I'm the best on. I think there are people who can say things more fluently and probably more expressively and with better facility than me. But I enjoy it because I get all of the things that I sometimes miss out on when I play other instruments, and things that sometimes connect me to other genres. Like I'm on the marimba, I get rhythm, I get harmony, I get texture, I get melody. Now, I think having a foundation on that is important because other instruments, I think, are informed by that. A piece that I just had published this past year called Southern Gothic is for bongos, wine bottle, and mixing bowl. And you say, well, like, what does that have to do with anything, right? But being able to hear melody and hear texture and hear accompaniment versus melody, I think what makes those other percussion instruments effective for me is that I come to them from a perspective of, as I said, melody and harmony and texture, things we don't necessarily specifically get, but if we can imply them on non-pitched things, how you balance a wine bottle against a mixing bowl, I think it would be difficult to come to an answer for that from anything else besides how do you balance counterpoint in a Bach piece. At least for me, I'm not saying if somebody has a different approach that's inferior or my way is better, but at least for me, having the marimba and having exposure to other composers and other time periods of music and genres of music, when I come to the other instruments, I'm able to think of the snare drum in a way that's not just thinking about the snare drum, or I'm able to play the timpani and understand its role in the orchestration of a Brahms symphony in a way that's more than just the 2 or 3 discrete pitches I'm playing and the rhythms I'm playing. So at least the way that I go about it is having something that accesses other composers and other styles of music, because in percussion, we didn't get our first concerto until about 1940.
Yep.
So there's a lot of other lessons that a lot of other musicians have and have absorbed before they even come to their contemporary repertoire. And I see a lot of younger students, their introduction to repertoire, which is what's being published right now. And that's great. I don't think there's anything necessarily bad about that, but I enjoy getting to come to contemporary repertoire, having had to figure out some of the lessons and the problems and the issues presented through centuries of previous types of music. So again, as I said, I don't think there's necessarily anything outstanding about how I play the instrument compared to many of the other world-class performers. But I will say, I think there's a unique perspective and approach to composing in playing non-pitched instruments, which I think I'm a little bit better at and maybe a little bit more visible on, that comes from really enjoying playing some of the more traditional elements of music that I can access on the marimba.
Oh, great. Well, since we are talking about your music and how you approach the instruments, and we're going to get to the Southern Gothic, just not now, but I would
Sure.
like to show a work called Tension and Release that you commissioned. Can you talk a little bit about it before we listen to you performing?
Sure. One of the things I've really come to love maybe in the past 5 years is the work of commissioning and collaboration with composers. And that started with a CD I released about 1.5 years ago, where I wanted to commission composers from the state of Mississippi to compose works for marimba. And coming from the fact that there wasn't a lot of music written for the instrument by composers from our state, and most people, when you ask them about musical culture in our state, they're going to talk about the blues or rock and roll or gospel, and those things are great. I certainly love the really deep and diverse musical culture in which we live here, but they're probably not going to say contemporary classical music. So I was curious of, if I were to commission native composers from here, what they would write, what they would say. And again, you get something that's just as diverse and multifaceted as what's going on in our state right now. But that really led to an interest in me of how I could collaborate and work with other composers as well. So this piece came about, this is by a composer, a young lady by the name of Jessica Flanagan, and she lives in the St. Louis area. And I had been playing a piece called Canaries by Elliott Carter for a long time. It was something I learned back when I lived in Boston, and it just worked out really well as a piece I could take on tour. I could travel with it, take it on recruiting trips. But I realized a lot of years had gone by and I hadn't really learned anything new on that instrument. So I wanted something new. And I learned about Jessica Flanagan's piece by reviewing one of her percussion ensemble works for the Percussive Notes journal. And also the fact that my daughter began playing percussion this past fall. And my wife is really great. She's a 6th grade band director in our town. She's really great about, even at the beginning level, programming music by a diverse collection of composers. Her goal, she told me, is hopefully to have every kid in her band see some composer on their program that they have something in common with. And I looked at my program, and it's a bunch of guys. I'm like, so I had to take a step back and realize, like, wow, if my daughter looked at the composers I was working with, not to take anything away from those those composers. I certainly enjoy and love and cherish my work with them. What would she think? That, so, and it just so happened, I came across this composer, Jessica Flanagan, was really impressed with her work, thought she had a really nice voice as far as percussion ensemble composing. So I reached out to her and asked if she'd consider writing anything for timpani. And she said, well, I've never composed anything for timpani. And I said, great, that's even better. So now we get something brand new, not just for me, but something for you, going back to kind of what you and I had talked about. Now you want to create opportunities for everybody involved, something where I'm outside of my comfort zone, she's outside of her comfort zone. We're doing something new. We don't know where it's going to go. It's going to go somewhere, but we don't know where. And it was, and normally when I work with composers, I don't really give them a lot of instruction or a lot of guidance. I tell them, I just want what's inside of you right now. And then of course, along the way, as I'm working on it, maybe we can discuss if there's something that doesn't work as well on the instrument. Maybe we can be open to those types of discussions. But as far as the fundamental musical material that's going on, I really want to be the ambassador and the interpreter for what they have. And so that way it's something totally unique and challenging for me. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Well, let's listen to Tension and Release. And this was performed when? 2000?
I recorded it this summer and I premiered it this October.
Mm-hmm.
And I toured on it a little bit. I think I might have done 3 or 4 concerts on the road where I played it. And I'm also going to perform it this March at the Women by Music Festival in Columbus, Mississippi.
All right. Wonderful. Let's listen to it.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
I also would like to take the opportunity to also show your solo with the wind ensemble here with us. And can you talk a little bit briefly about what the work is? And I think this is the third movement, right?
Yes, and this isn't the MSU Wind Ensemble. This is the Starkville High School Wind Ensemble, and they're performing this, or we performed this a couple of years back at the Mississippi Bandmasters Association conference. This was actually the first piece that I commissioned as part of my CD from a couple of years back. And this was commissioned by a good colleague of ours, good friend of ours, guy by the name of Clifton Taylor. And the idea for this came about, we were tossing around the idea of getting someone to compose a concerto for percussion or for marimba and wind ensemble. And so, we started going down the list of well-known wind ensemble composers and started, figuring out what the budget for that might be. And as we were doing that, the idea occurred that instead of maybe asking a big name composer to try to elevate us, why don't we use whatever visibility as a university we have or as a performer I have to elevate somebody that we know who's not as well known. And then the first name that came to my mind, it came to all of our minds, was Clifton Taylor. We do a lot of work together arranging and composing music for the marching band here. And so I asked him, and he was on board. And so he wrote the band version. And then since then, there's been a percussion ensemble version, very similar to what Ney Rosario did with his marimba concerto. So that way you don't need a full band. You can learn the solo, but then you can do it with your percussion ensemble. I think there's a piano reduction that's been made as well too. And I've had an opportunity to perform that a good amount. I think it takes a year off my life each time I play it because it is not easy. At least for me, it's not. So so this is the third movement of that. It has it's written in a typical 3 movement form: fast, slow, fast. And Cliff is very much influenced by jazz and sort of popular styles. So we thought that this was kind of unique in that it's a marimba concerto written in a classical sense with a more classically oriented ensemble, but it includes a lot of the language and styles of contemporary music.
If you don't mind, we're going to listen, and I may cut this a little shorter because there are other things that I would like to show before we end the interview. So here it is, the concert piece for marimba and wind ensemble. Great.
Thank you.
It is really good. He was conducting, wasn't he? Is that
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He's
really fun.
He's a very fine musician. Musician in
Absolutely.
all sense, and an excellent teacher as well. I would like to talk about the sequential studies that is part of one of your books, right? And this is for snare drum. Tell me a little bit more about this book and what we are going to listen right now.
Sure. All of my books that I've written have kind of come out of specific experiences in my teaching. And usually where I'm teaching and there's not a book that exactly does what I want it to do. And I feel like the student would be better served if there was some little thing in there to connect different ideas. So in snare drumming, we have things called rudiments, and it's been compared to maybe what scales are to other instruments, and there are different sticking patterns, the combinations of right hands and left hands, and putting an accent in certain places that serve as a good solid vocabulary when you're first learning the instrument. And that style of playing, those combinations of rudiments, almost serves as a vocabulary when playing more marching style pieces of music. But at the very minimum, when students begin learning the instrument, they're often taught one of the rudiments, and then they go on to the next one. And over time, you start to develop this vocabulary where you can start to use these in different pieces. And what I was realizing, I think I was actually teaching one of the students in our community music school here, and we would learn one of them, and he would become very good at that. But then the next chapter or the next thing in the book we were doing would just go on to the next thing, kind of forgetting that we still need to keep reinforcing the previous thing that we learned. So for example, maybe the first week we would learn the paradiddle, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, and get good at that. The next week we would go on to a 5-stroke roll, digga digga dum, digga digga dum, digga digga dum, and we would go on, but there was no way to review what had been learned in previous lessons in previous weeks. So I wanted to have a book where we would start off with one of them, and then the next week it would introduce the next concept or the next rudiment, but it would still, in the etude, incorporate a little bit of what we had learned before. And then the week after, we add maybe the third rudiment, but still in the etude, there's a little bit of what we learned in the previous week and the week before that. So by the time you get to the end of maybe 12 of these etudes, you're playing every single one of these things. So yeah, really the need for reinforcing that. And I wasn't able to find that, at least in any of the books I was using. And at that time, Mark Ford, who started Musicon Publications, he spoke to me and asked me if I had anything I would consider submitting for publication with them. And the way I've always gone about working with publishers is looking at their catalog and seeing what they don't have.
Yeah.
So, for example, I don't want to publish my snare drum book with a really well-known company that has 10 other snare drum books.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't benefit me, and it doesn't benefit them. I would rather have it benefit both of us, where they're a well-known company for publishing some other things, but this is the only thing like that in their catalog. So they're going to sell more of that one thing instead of having the sales be distributed between maybe 5 other things that they have. And it makes what I'm doing more noticeable as well too. And since then, or I wrote it and then started experimenting with different students to see how it worked. And something I've always done whenever I compose or arrange something before it's published, before I even send it to a publisher, I'll send it, I'll put it up for free on the Mississippi band directors social media, and just say, hey, this is something free for your students. And if you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it, because again, all my teaching and all my ideas are theoretical up until the point an actual student, an actual 12-year-old kid has to learn this. And maybe what's going on in my mind and what I think works could be very different from what actually works. So again, I think it's a win-win, where the teachers get some material they can use for free, and also I get some feedback as well.
Can we listen? I'm afraid that we're running out of time, but
Okay.
I really would like to listen to it, and ask Andrea as well to put the music percussives.com
Sure.
available, and for the other for people that are watching, that they have a link to purchase your book.
Sure. Hi, my name is Jason Baker, and over the course of my career as a teacher, I've always found snare drum rudiments to be an important tool in teaching the mechanics and motions essential in percussion playing. A great place to start is the 40 Percussive Arts Society International Snare Drum Rudiments. However, I've always struggled to find a method that both introduces new rudiments to students while also reviewing and refining those previously learned. This led me to write my new book, Sequential Studies for Rudimental Snare Drum, released by Musicon Publications. Presented in 5 sections, each focuses on a limited number of rudiments drawn from the roll, paradiddle, flam, and drag categories. Each section consists of 6 etudes and concludes with a summary etude containing all rudiments utilized up to that point in the book.
Can I interrupt a little bit, and maybe we can go on, and because I'm really curious about your composition, Southern Gothic, and I think you already explained that it's some unconventional instruments that you used.
Yeah.
Can you list them again? They are wine
Sure.
bottle that I remember.
Yeah, it's a set of bongos, so two bongos on a stand, and then a wine bottle and a mixing bowl, or wine bottle, mixing bowl, and then two wood blocks.
All right.
So you have skins, wood, metal,
Glass.
and glass. Yeah. Mhm.
All right. Let's listen to that.
Sure.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, I know you, 19 years now, and I got to know you more now, just with this 1 hour conversation.
Thank you.
Because we
thank
never really had the time to explore. I never had the time to talk to you about all the things that you do and how you come about to get those done. So it's been a pleasure getting to know you even more now.
you.
And I just want to say that I always enjoy working with you, and you are a very serious musician. And this is what makes you being who you are and improving the life of our students here at Mississippi State University. So thank you very much for accepting our invitation for this interview. And we're going to go backstage so Andrea can finish the interview, and just hang on a second and then we will talk later. But
Sure.
thank you very much for everybody that listened to
you.
us, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Seba and Dr. Baker, for this beautiful and very interesting interview. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. Thank you. Muito obrigada a todos vocês por estarem conosco. Esse é um programa da Escola de Música e Artes Cênicas da Universidade Federal de Goiás, juntamente com a Reitoria Digital, a Mississippi State University, a Pró-Reitoria de Extensão e Cultura e a Universidad del Atlántico, com o apoio da Fundação para Ciência e Tecnologia de Portugal, Centro de Estudos de Sociologia e Estética Musical da Universidade Nova de Lisboa, Centro de Estudos Brasileiros, Rádio Universitária e Rádio Brasil Central FM. Fazem parte da equipe do programa, além de mim, Pablo Lisboa, Rosângela Yazbek Seba e Yamira Rodrigues Nunes. Nossa proposta é levar a todos os interessados assuntos relacionados à importância da arte e seu papel na sociedade. The Piano and its Perspectives is a program of the School of Music and Performing Arts, Digital Department and Provost of Culture of the Federal University of Goiás, Universidad del Atlántico, Colombia, and the Mississippi State University, with support from the Foundation for Science and Technology of Portugal, Center for Studies in Sociology and Musical Aesthetics of the New University of Lisbon, Center for Brazilian Studies, Radio Universitária, and Radio Brasil Central FM. Besides me, Pablo Lisboa, Rosângela Yazbek Seba, and Yamira Rodrigues Nunes are part of the program's team. Our proposal is to bring to all those interested issues related to the importance of music and its role in society. Thanks so much to all of you for the audience. Thank you very much. We can see every week in this time. Thank you very much.